Welcome to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, a podcast about geek culture by lawyers, with your hosts, Ben Siders and Kirk Damon.
Today's episode is brought to you by Concordia Metalworks, the Outer Rim's leading Beskar forge. Stop in and see our new waiting room, now with individual booths. When you take your helmet off here, you can always put it back on again.
Welcome back to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, the holiday podcast that asks interesting holiday questions that don't have any holiday answers, with your holiday host, Ben Siders, that's me, and the other guy is Kirk Holiday Damon.
As always, Kirk is the captain of the Holiday Enterprise.
We are intellectual property lawyers and certified geeks practicing law in St. Louis, Missouri. You can find me, Ben, on Twitter at Benjamin Siders, and you can find Kirk at KirkDMN. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at LGG Pod and find us on our website, LGGpodcast.com. Today is a very special holiday edition of A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, which
it will involve the favorite Wookiee holiday. No, it won't.
What was it called? The Day of Life gift?
Something like that.
We're not going to talk. Well, we might talk about the Star Wars holiday special.
Of course, we're going to talk about the Star Wars holiday special because we have to.
This is an all Star Wars episode, which we're recording this before Thanksgiving, so some of the things we say may be out of date by the time you get
they
this.
will be out of date.
Well,
that's
the Mandalorian discussion
fun.
will be, but we have no outline for this episode. Something I don't think we've ever done before, where we just sort of sat down and.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've ever at least released an episode. We've recorded.
We've definitely done that. We'd never forced you to listen to it. So today we're just going to freewheel on The Mandalorian, what we've seen so far. A little bit on episode 9, and then just sort of our general. This is a conversation Kirk and I probably have once a week, just some sort of general Star Wars discussion. And what this really is kind of getting back to our roots. This whole podcast got started because we have a Star Wars conversation about once a week, and at some point we were like, and then we had we were up in where were we when we were having that same conversation with Ed? Grand Rapids. We went up and we were talking Star Wars stuff with a long-time dedicated listener, Ed, in Grand Rapids. And we were like, we were thinking of making a podcast out of this. And Ed said, I would listen to that all day long. I'm like, all right, well, we got one listener, so it's worth it.
Yeah, thanks, Ed, for listening. We don't know if there's any more of you.
Yeah, if anybody else is like Ed and is a crazy person who loves this podcast, get in touch with us on Twitter at LGGpod. So, a Star Wars, Kirk. So we've seen 3 episodes of The Mandalorian.
Yep, and keep in mind, episode 3 just came out. So that's when we're recording this. So we have no idea what's going to be in episode 4.
Yeah, we should say spoiler alert because we're just going to talk about what's happened so far. So if you have somehow not yet watched The Mandalorian, don't listen to this episode yet because we're going to talk about what's happened in the first 3 episodes. Yep. But obviously, by the time you get this, I think there's 8. So they should all or mostly all be out by the time you listen to this.
Yeah, we're probably going to be close to the end of, I guess, season 1, at least the way they portrayed it. I think it's worth noting, and I'm just going to point out from our last episode, we were talking about streaming and the nature of the change of things in conjunction with our last episode. Disney Plus is my first adventure into streaming in anything. I don't even stream music.
Kirk's kind of a Luddite. He's got like an iPhone from like 2009.
It's a 5S. It still works.
He plays Hearthstone on it. I'm going to put play in air quotes because it locks up on him all the time.
No, I'm very much in just generally what it is. I love new technology, but I'm not real fond of having to set new things up.
I'm with you there.
I like it to be simple. I like it to be straightforward. Quite frankly, I was stunned at how easy it was to set up Disney Plus, at least on my iPad. I'm still trying to get my TV.
That's high praise coming from you, yeah.
Yeah. I'm still trying to get my TV to set up, but that's my TV's issue.
Luddite.
I don't want to get a new TV because I have a nice TV, even if it is old. But yeah,
I'm actually the same way. Like when we moved into our new house, I bought a new computer. That was 9 years ago. I've not bought a new one since. But I like to get bleeding edge computers, so I can only buy one once a decade.
You're like me as to what it is. It's when I buy a computer, I buy a bleeding edge computer, and then I keep it for 10 years till it's not bleeding edge anymore. It's not even the back edge. It's like the handle.
I usually only buy a new one when the formats or the standards have changed so much that I can no longer upgrade my old one. I only bought this one because I couldn't actually buy new storage for the old one because I couldn't find an SATA cable. It was all the new SATA 2, and I'm like, well, I guess I can't retrofit this one anymore. So.
Yeah, so definitely the thing with it. But yeah, so I got Disney Plus. I have to admit, I joined Disney Plus pretty much to watch The Mandalorian.
That's why we joined it.
And to get caught up in the Avengers universe because I never got into, and just generally, and I think I mentioned it before on the show, I was never into superheroes as a kid. I didn't particularly care for them. I was monstrously into Star Trek, but did not particularly care for superheroes. And so I have not seen a lot of the Marvel universe. I catch up with it on planes for the most part. I have seen both sets of,
Infinity War.
Infinity War. But like I haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy, and so I've literally just started streaming Guardians of the Galaxy.
One of the better movies.
Yeah, I know it was one of the better movies, and so I'm starting to just sort of get involved. That's part of the reason I got Disney is because of the fact Disney Plus is because I really wanted to see The Mandalorian, but I also quite frankly wanted to get caught up in the Marvel universe, and also with my kids, it just gives me access to be able to show them many things. My daughter's expressed a lot of interest in seeing the Lady and the Tramp, the live action Lady and the Tramp.
My kids have been saying the same thing. All of a sudden they're like, "We want to see the Lady and the Tramp." I'm like, "How have you even heard of the show?"
It's called previews.
I guess.
And really, we commented in the previous one, you guys should have all seen it by now as to those who are going to see it. We saw Frozen 2 opening night. The previews in front of Frozen 2 I thought were really cool because they did sort of all of Disney. So they had a bunch of Disney animation. They had a preview for Star Wars, which I thought was kind of neat.
Have we seen all the trailers now? I think we have.
I think we've seen all the trailers, unless they've released another one. Now, obviously, when we're recording this, they may release another one post this, but I don't think they're going to.
I saw something on YouTube that said final Star Wars Episode 9 trailer. Yeah. But I mean, that could be anything.
Who knows? But yeah, so I think it's been interesting to sort of see what that is. And again, I think we're going to be speculating with this, but I found them, I got it to get The Mandalorian pretty much as to what it was. I'd heard definitely a lot of the hype. It looked really good from the trailers I'd seen. I liked the concept of it. I quite frankly like the concept of a good Star Wars TV show. Mm-hmm. I have very, very fond memories of watching the Ewok special.
Ewoks, yes.
Just stumbling upon it, when I'm watching TV at one point in time going, wait, this isn't Return of the Jedi, but it has Ewoks in it. What is this? And needing to watch it. Because, again, sort of referencing back to our last episode, that if you didn't watch it then, you might not ever see it again. And things like that. But the idea of actually having sort of good Star Wars content, and by good Star Wars content, I essentially mean non-animated Star Wars content, and not like the holiday special. I told you we were going to reference it, which isn't really Star Wars content, so to speak, as much as it's a holiday special that's just a general Star Wars thing.
Let's start out with this with The Mandalorian. So I'm going to say, I'm going to give you two things to do.
Spoilers.
Let's start out with, on a scale of 1 to 10, so far through episode 3, let's each give a rating of how good we think it is. And then if you could describe it with, say, one word so far, what would that word be? And I'm going to vamp for a second so you can think about this. I would give it like a solid 7.5, I think, 7.5 or 8. I'm definitely entertained by it. I'm also somewhat frustrated and annoyed with it. And we'll get into the reasons why in a second. My one word, though, I think is harder to come up with, but I guess what I would say is promising. Like there's good production quality for the most part. It looks like Star Wars. It feels like Star Wars. There are actors in it who, when I first heard that they were being cast, I thought there's no way you're going to put Werner Herzog on TV and convince me he's in the Star Wars universe, but they did. And
it took all about 30 seconds.
Even less so with Carl Weathers. I'm just going to be thinking of Happy Gilmore the whole time, but no, he really pulls it off pretty well. So that's all working for me. We'll get into what I'm frustrated by in a second, but so those are my thoughts. What's your rating and what's your one-word description?
Interestingly enough, I was trying to think of a rating. I actually came to 7.5 before you said it, which I thought was very interesting as to the fact that we were almost dead on top of each other.
It's not bad, but it's not amazing, right?
Yeah, and I have a lot of the same comments you did. I really enjoy watching it. I think it's very entertaining. I'm a bit frustrated by a couple of things in it. Slightly differently than you are, I think. I'm sure with it. If I had to pick my word for it, and actually the word I'd pick for it, surprisingly, is dark. And I think it's one of those where I find that it's going back to, and again, I use a lot of synonyms in conjunction with gritty, stuff like that. I really feel like it's going back in many respects to the premise of Star Wars, of Western in space.
Yeah, definitely.
This is the
Dusty
Wild
Tavern,
West. It's rough. It's not pleasant. And the thing that I really think is so interesting about The Mandalorian, and we're going to pick on this from our last episode, I'm going to pick on Greedo again. We can't go back to the fact that Han shot first in Star Wars, yet I think The Mandalorian's going to shoot first a lot and does.
The Mandalorian is mercilessly slaughtered and disintegrated at least 24 people so far.
And he's killed many of them through, conniving tricks. We're going to start with some spoilers here just to sort of give you the warning. The immediate take is him shooting the bounty hunter droid, which to me is an assassin droid. I don't know where the bounty hunter droid versus assassin droid thing comes from. That's from watching Clone Wars. But he clearly literally just shoots him in the side of the head while he's focused on, getting the quarry. Now, it's obviously a necessary plot point, but, I guess in the, if we're going to do this as to, what the tavern scene was, we needed to have our, bounty hunter droid shoot and miss the quarry before he actually gets shot by the Mandalorian in response. Where are we getting this thing from that says that this is very, very much sort of, and again, I use that term dark.
This is a little bizarre that we have this on Disney Plus at the same time they're releasing the McCloskey edition of
the McCloskey edition of Star Wars. We need the McCloskey edition of the holiday special.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's do this then. Well, and then what's your one-word description?
So that was my word description is dark, I think is the thing that I'd put in conjunction with it.
Okay.
And again, I use that term a little bit loosely because I think there may be a better synonym as to what it is. It's the first one I could come to. I mean, gritty is not a bad one, but really what I'm trying to refer to is the idea that it's going back to that old Western style Star Wars universe where, it's very rough. It's very rough and tumble. It's a dark universe.
Yeah.
We are talking about bounty hunters. We are talking about people who live on the dregs of society. Even a lot of the sort of humor moments that are put into The Mandalorian are dark humor moments.
Yeah. So the next exercise is thing you like the most about it so far and thing you like the least, all right? So this one's pretty easy for me. The thing I like the most so far is the world building.
Yep.
There's been some I think deft and well integrated world building elements in the narrative that have largely filled in holes in the story that I didn't even know that I wanted to know about. In particular, the sort of background and culture of the Mandalorian people. We're getting glimpses of that. We can see that his parents were taken from him at some point. We see that in the flashbacks when they're hammering in the armor. The whole thing with the signet where he was going to get the horned beast as his signet. And he said, no, it wasn't a clean kill. And just that one line, the fact that he gets a signet at all is world building. That the signet is this beast that he killed is world building. And that he has the integrity, I take it's a matter of integrity, to say, I don't deserve it yet because I was assisted by an enemy, and I like the way it's done because all the other characters in the show already know these things, right? The characters know them. It's their society. We don't know this as the viewer, and the writers are teaching us about this through the story and not in a really boring, stupid way that insults our intelligence. The characters are just talking very much in world, and we're learning by osmosis. It has a very Luke on Dagobah in Empire Strikes Back tone to it where I'm just captivated by all of this because I'm learning new information. So that's all very well done.
Yep, I have to agree. I think the thing I really enjoyed, I enjoyed the world building. What I actually really like about it, and I'll just use sort of two specific examples, is what I like about the world building. I have really enjoyed the interaction between him and his handler, for lack of a better term. I don't think we've given a name for the character. But the idea of, bounty hunting is just a profession. There's lots of people with this.
The Carl Weathers character?
Carl Weathers character, yes. And the idea that, hey, you've got these pucks, this is what they mean, this is how you collect bounties. And even sort of associated with the puck, one of the things I think was great is the presentation of the bounty hunter droid. I actually really enjoyed the bounty hunter droid, actually, as one of the presentations with it, with the idea that he's presented at, and I've always liked this actually about the droids in the Star Wars universe. They're presented as very autonomous, as very intelligent, very autonomous, but at the same time living by very rigid rules at times. I mean, C-3PO does it. You see sort of C-3PO do it in conjunction with the original movies and things like that. And we definitely see that bounty hunter droid do it, where it's the, I'm going to blow myself up, initiating self-destruct protocol because I cannot be captured pursuant to my manufacturer's requirements. And it's don't do it because we're not done yet.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, then I'll belay it, and that kind of thing. And it's like, it's interesting to sort of see, I think, that kind of presentation of droids, which is actually one of the things I've really enjoyed about it, is that presentation of droids with it, and definitely the world building. The other one I've actually really enjoyed in the world building is, and I think it's something that's just going to be an ongoing presentation, is the concept of arms and armor in the Mandalorian world.
Yeah, in a world with blasters and plasma weapons and disintegrators, armor, like metal armor, just seems really antiquated. We don't do that now, with powdered firearms.
Though it obviously clearly works, and that's the thing we've also presented, is that steel is very, very strong, and there's we've seen multiple people get hit in steel, him in the armor and, the other guys, in the ingot. And that steel is clearly very strong, can take a blaster and can stop it. I think that gives us a lot of the idea that, like, no, wait, there is armor that works. Like, stormtroopers are not wearing plastic. There is armor that works in this world against blasters, against, even very strong blasters that we've seen, potentially work with it. But, like, what I also like is quite frankly, the forge. And the idea that we're seeing very traditional forging techniques be used on this extremely powerful armor. To me, quite frankly, and maybe this is a little bit of Marvel Universe bleeding into Disney, it really has a feel of Infinity War.
It does a little bit, yeah.
And the idea of how do you get these amazing weapons? Oh, because there's these amazing forges. And I kind of like that. The idea that, like, there can be a creation of very strong light super weapons, things like the lightsaber, which suddenly feels more real because the idea that, we can forge things like this, even with using what are arguably relatively primitive techniques.
Yeah. So, and by the way, Carl Weathers' character is named Grief, Greef.
Oh, yeah, we didn't know that, actually.
Karga.
It was Grief. I remember him saying that at one point in time, yes.
That's a terrible name, but okay. Karga's fine. Grief is bad. Things you don't like. This is where we may differ more. And this is where I'm also frustrated by The Mandalorian. I don't know how to describe this. It feels like token fan servicey. There's a lot of things that are in the show that feel like they're only there the way that they're there because the people writing the show think that that's what fans expect. And I got a couple examples for you.
I already know what your first one is.
The first one is he lands on, in the first episode, he goes to some unknown planet and he meets what we think is an Ugnaught, who's one of the best characters on the show. I hope he comes back. And he tells the Ugnaught, I've got to go to this base somewhere to recover my quarry, whoever I'm trying to get. The Ugnaught helps him because there hasn't been peace ever since the smugglers or whoever it is got to that base. And the Mandalorian says, okay, well, let's go. And he's like, nope, first you have to tame this bizarre, round, bipedal, bouncy beast. And there's a whole taming scene that happens, which it's all well enough done. I mean, none of it is badly made. The craft of the movie is fine. Then we see them running to the location, and they're just running over top a bunch of crevices, and occasionally jumping relatively short distances that look like a guy like the Mandalorian probably would be able to cover anyway. I could see the Ugnaught maybe not being able to. Did not really see the need for that scene at all, but that was just like one scene. However, then we find out that in the same planet that has this terrain that is unpassable unless you are on a small bipedal bouncy beast, we have Jawas and a sandcrawler. And we've never seen Jawas on a spaceship, I always thought Jawas were just these things that lived on Tatooine, and that's why they wore robes, because it was hot out. The same reason that everybody else on Tatooine wore robes is because if you live in a desert, you got to stay covered up. And the sandcrawler makes sense there because it's a vast open desert that's hard to traverse, so you have sort of an enclosed city. Now we have a sandcrawler on this other planet with Jawas on it for some reason that is also desolate, but completely different type of terrain until it doesn't. It didn't make any sense to me at all why that was there, other than we as the fans have seen a sandcrawler, and they wanted to have somebody scavenging parts so that they could have him fight the mud beast. So they put all that in there. So I didn't like that part. Just as I'm watching it, I'm like, why? Why is there a sandcrawler here? It doesn't make any sense. The other thing I didn't like, I don't mind Baby Yoda. I don't think I love Baby Yoda as much as everybody else does, but I don't mind Baby Yoda. It was the only part of the first episode where I was like, what? I was really not expecting that at all.
I was totally expecting the quarry to be a droid.
Yeah, I do find the floating bassinet kind of an annoying thing, because I think the reason it's there is that they tried to animate Baby Yoda, and it looks silly. So they have the bassinet to avoid that. But every time he's walking around with this floating egg, it looks silly. The other thing I didn't like, though, is why does Baby Yoda have the Force?
Well, and I have a feeling we're going to get explained that.
I think we are, but
I think that's coming.
Again, Baby Yoda is bald. Why? Because the only other Yoda creature we've seen was bald. But he was bald because he was 900 years old. You would think the younger version, he has tufts of hair.
Yeah.
Wouldn't a younger version have hair? And then Baby Yoda has the Force. Why? Because the other Yoda that we've seen had the Force. So now this one does. I just assumed Yoda just happened to be one of the members of the species that was Force sensitive, like everybody else on the Jedi Council. Every Twi'lek is not Force sensitive, but there is one on the Jedi Council.
A couple of them, actually.
That is. But then the one in Jabba's palace, one is just his doorman, and one is a dancer. Like they all have different jobs. Not every member of the Yoda species has the Force. But now it seems like they're doing that because, we've seen a Yoda before, so we have to see a Yoda lift something up, because the last time we saw a Yoda, he lifted something heavy up.
It's interesting when you sort of talk about it, because it's, in some sense, I think our complaints are similar, but mine's in a sort of very different vein as to what it is in the thing. So it's like, the talk with it, quite frankly, the bipedal bouncy beast did not really bother me as to whatever it was. I think the reason that scene existed is to watch him tame it, and I commented particularly about it. I said it to you afterwards. What struck me immediately about that scene is he tames it by holding out his hands one behind the other. Mm-hmm. It's virtually the exact same motion Anakin uses to tame the Mudhorn in Attack of the Clones.
See, that's what I thought they were going to go with that, is when he's fighting the Mudhorn, that comes back. Yeah. That's the payoff for that scene, is we learn as the audience that he knows how to tame beasts for some reason, and then when he sees the Mudhorn, he uses it again, but that's not what happens.
I think we're going to end up with something with the Mandalorian being slightly Force sensitive. I think is going to be the idea behind it, and that's the reason why I go straight to that scene. I think that was what that was trying to lead in. It's a scene that was done to try to be a throwaway scene at the time, but it's going to become of increased relevance later. And that's, again, I'm assuming there's going to be a payoff by the time this episode airs.
Yeah, so we're only 3 seasons in, so you all know more than we do at this point.
So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But yeah, I didn't have as much trouble with that. I did joke about it. It's, for those of you, I'm also a fan of Warhammer 40K. It's a squig. That's totally what he is riding. So that's why I tend to refer to it as the bipedal bouncy beast. But the thing that I had sort of with it, and the thing that I sort of have liked least about it, is I found certain inconsistencies that are bothering me. So the example with
is internal or with other?
Internally.
Yeah.
And that's what's really bothering me. So the example is the trackers for Yoda. We found out that there's lots of people who had trackers for Yoda, but we also know that there's no pucks, because these are presumably only given out trackers. So how does the bounty hunter droid know that he has to be brought back dead? Because one of the key to it is that the bounty hunter droid specifically says the instructions were explicit. The target was to be terminated. Mm-hmm. That presumably means a different party did it, because obviously that, Werner Herzog's character does not want him dead.
He specifically says there is a substantial decrease in the reward if he is not brought back alive.
What are you doing? That wasn't our agreement. I'm being practical. And that kind of thing. And that's, okay, well, why does he want him dead? We also have the 3... I think it's boss characters, I don't know what they're called, that attack him in the Ridge. One appears to try to kill him very specifically at the end.
Yeah.
And we kind of look at it and go, why are they trying to kill him? They presumably want him dead. Okay, which to me immediately meant there are multiple parties looking for this quarry. Yet what we see is when he takes Yoda back, baby Yoda back at the end and runs off with it, all of the trackers light up simultaneously.
And then we also learned that Carl Weathers gave them out to everybody.
Yeah.
And they've all still got them. Why?
And you kind of bump into this thing, is it's like, wait a minute, we're getting conflicting orders here. Now, again, we're only 3 episodes in. There's a possibility this is going to be explained later on. That really bothered me.
Yeah, that aspect of episode 3, to me, had the feeling of the episode's almost over and there hasn't been a big fight scene yet, although there had been. I mean, they just rampaged through the Imperial facility and slaughtered 9 stormtroopers. But, then we have, I guess that's my other thing I don't like. I don't want to get super political on this, but it feels like the movie is being made for early teenage boys, basically. Mm-hmm. There's virtually no female characters. I can't think of any other than the blacksmith.
Now, there is one that appears there's a female character that appears in conjunction with the photo that's behind the promotional photo. So I'm wondering if we just haven't been introduced to her yet.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. But the whole thing seems geared towards youngish, early teenage boys, and the action scenes. They're all well done and fine, but they're not terribly interesting. I don't think it got kind of interesting when he jumped in the speeder and told the R2 unit to go. Yeah. All right, well that shows a character being smart and he's actually got a plan of some kind. But it really looked like he just picked up Baby Yoda and walked out and really had no idea what he was going to do, and it just kind of makes the character seem dumb and thoughtless.
Yeah, I had a little bit of the idea that this was spur of the moment, this was arguably, he has the thing where he sees the ball missing off of the controls.
That was well done. I like that.
And that's what sends him back. And I think it was one of those things where he just felt the need to do it. And again, I think part of this is we're going to get into his motivation. One of the things I really thought
because he was abandoned as a child, so I think that's where that connection is.
I think one of the things we've also had with it, and I think it's a very important sort of element of it, is, and I thought it was a very interesting scene, is the armor forging scene with the Forge Master.
Those are well done
Forge
scenes,
Master.
also interesting scenes.
And one of the ones in particular, you talk about the idea of the signet, but one of the ones I also had with her is the interaction with the other Mandalorians who are obviously very, very opposed to the Empire. We've met that they're very opposed to the Empire. We've had that introduced. But the phrase of, have you ever taken your helmet off? Has it ever been taken off of you? Who would choose a life like this voluntarily? And shouldn't we basically respect you for basically choosing this life, which I thought was a very intriguing thing. The other thing I think we really have gotten in it that they've done very subtly and quite well is the Mandalorians clearly just hate the Empire.
Yeah.
And we've obviously seen that in the flashbacks. Again,
which is interesting because it looks like it's the old Republic.
It's a battle droid.
It's a battle droid
that goes after those guys. It's a destroyer. I mean, it's the wrist-mounted heavy blaster
guys. But didn't the destroyers weren't those the Trade Federation's droids?
Well, technically, the Trade Federation becomes all of the.
I guess, but the Trade Federation winds up at war with the Republic.
Yeah.
Again, the whole timeline is incoherent. I don't understand who's on what side.
And part of it is I think we're not there yet. I've got to believe that some of this is going to get explained because they can't have used a battle droid on purpose. They obviously could have made it stormtroopers and it would have been fine. They obviously used a battle droid on purpose.
To set the timing.
It's done as a small thing, but it's very clear. The battle droid is framed at the end.
But if he remembers a battle droid, that was Yoda's time when he was in charge of the Jedi Council and had to be the most famous person in the Old Republic.
Yeah.
How does he not know who Yoda is and see this baby one and be like, oh my God?
Yeah. Now, and again, I know you haven't watched it. I have been watching the Clone Wars, and there are Clone Wars episodes set on Mandalore, and they let a little bit of the sort of background of Mandalore out and the Mandalorians out. You definitely see them wearing the shiny armor. So that's one of the things that I think is intriguing. Whereas he's also the only one with the shiny armor. The other ones all have, sort of the matte green, gray camouflage type things like Boba Fett had. So I think I think there's still a lot of world being to be done, and I think that maybe part of the frustration with this is they may be taking it slow, which quite frankly is good. I mean, I don't mind being confused so long as these things get resolved later. I was an enormous fan of Lost. I really enjoyed the fact that sort of Lost had a lot of unanswered questions that they answered slowly. The problem with Lost is that they either answered them incoherently, didn't answer them at all, or then gave conflicting answers. And so I'm hoping that they have a little bit more of a coherent plot for this. One, quite frankly, I trust Disney better.
Well, Jon Favreau, I think, is the writer, and he's in a lot of the Marvel movies. I think he's fine.
He's obviously written large scale, multi-movie spanning things. It's not a problem for him to do it that are pretty coherent. I mean, the Marvel universe is pretty coherent. It has some issues with it, but it's pretty coherent. But again, I think that's the big things I've got in conjunction with The Mandalorian. I'm very hopeful. I found episode 3 quite disappointing. I really enjoyed episodes 1 and 2. I found episode 3 disturbingly predictable. To me, it was exactly what was going to happen, and it was we need to have a big fight scene.
Yeah.
The only two things
fight scenes don't seem to advance the plot at all. It's like, okay, we're going to have a couple of scenes where people are talking, but it's like they're aware that they got a bunch of like I said, 13-year-old boys with ADHD who can't sit still without there being a fight scene.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have these long, drawn-out combat scenes that don't do much to explain the characters. And there's a way you can do action scenes that also build characters, advance plot, and do some characterization, and these just don't. It's just like, okay, we're done with plot things now. Now it's time for an extended action sequence. It really has a prequel level of dubious pacing to it.
Yeah, and that's I think and I think episode 3 really did highlight that, partially because episode 3 is the shortest of them.
Yeah, what do you think of the runtime? I mean, none of these are longer than about 45
I found episode
minutes.
3 overly short. I didn't have a problem with either of the other two, but surprisingly, they're 5-6 minutes shorter than it was from episode 2.
It makes you think there's some other things that got cut. At the last minute,
or it's because this is kind of a transition episode. They need to, what's going to happen in 4 needs to be in 4. They couldn't add anything else.
That could be.
To get to sort of where it needs to be. Because obviously, a lot of times we have the transitions are leaving a planet. I mean, we've had that happen twice as the transition from leaving a planet. I did like the fact of sort of the jetpacks and the real use of the Mandalorians of the jetpacks, and also his comment of like, I got to get one of those. Like, hey, this is something different. One of these guys is potentially more senior than him.
Yeah, so I had mixed feelings about that. It felt like a Deus Ex Machina.
It was.
We've written ourselves into a corner, and I didn't feel like his connection to the rest of his group was strong enough for them to all come to his rescue, out themselves, and then have to relocate at that point. They all seemed jealous and annoyed with him, and I thought that's something that happens in the finale of a season like this, where you spend the season building up the relationship between the main character and the rest of these people, and you sort of set up the adversity now, and it pays off later when they come to respect him and realize that they've got a stronger connection as a culture that, it's us against everybody else. I thought that was premature at this point. I actually hated the line, I gotta get me one of those. That is the most cliched, canned, stupid, overused, comic relief line. I'm convinced Jon Favreau did not write that line, and that there was no scene with the Rocketeer outside of his window there flying by, and that some producer at Disney said, this isn't funny enough. It's kind of a sad note, so do something funny, and that's what you do when you can't think of anything else.
Yeah.
I also told my kids were watching it, they were like, so who is the Mandalorian? And I've decided the Mandalorian is a combination of Star-Lord and Batman in space.
The thing that I had with it, the thing that I liked about it, I actually liked the coming to the rescue and following up on the idea that they were kind of annoyed with him. With the idea, and where I really got it, is this hatred of the Empire.
Yeah.
He had just shot up, obviously, an Imperial facility. They were very annoyed with him for essentially having turned over the quarry and gotten the metal, which had Imperial stamps. Sort of the association with the Imperium. We know very early on, and he turns down Imperial credits and accepts credit in a different payment. And as even commented out, they still spend the same. It's not like Imperial credits aren't good money.
Yeah, he just doesn't want them.
It's just he doesn't want them and won't accept them and is willing to take a decreased payment to avoid them. The idea that the Mandalorians are just very, very opposed to the Empire, and that was kind of what I took with it, is they came to his rescue because he just destroyed the Empire. I mean, he took this huge risk.
That makes sense. Yeah, I could see that.
They came to him as basically this was the honorable thing to do. You are going to destroy the Empire. And I really get the impression what we're going to see in this is a very, very strong anti-Empire character.
But the people they're fighting at the end are mostly not Imperial. They're Grief Karga's people and the other bounty hunters. And I don't know. I mean, the scene all worked. I did like the world building elements where they were, where he was like, you guys got to relocate, and the big guy goes, "This is the way." You know, I like that. It sort of shows that there's a level of loyalty there that runs stronger that we just haven't seen on camera yet.
I also think part of the reason, quite frankly, they needed to do it is they needed to get rid of the other trackers. They needed to basically kill off the bounty hunters so that we didn't have the issue with the other trackers, because we all knew it. As soon as he grabbed Yoda, everybody was after him.
This isn't like a movie where you're stuck with some script somebody else wrote. They could have just written those out of the plot earlier and done something different. Like we could have gotten from A to B the exact same way. If he breaks into the Imperial facility, that's your extended fight scene, which kind of makes sense. There's a chance to show some weaponry and gadgetry there.
Yeah.
There's a confrontation with a doctor. That could have given us a little more information. That was an interesting scene. Then on the way out, he just runs into Grief, and they have a conversation that builds those two characters, and Grief lets him go, or doesn't, or he shoots him and takes off. We did not need a 15-minute scene full of CGI to get him out of town. It just felt crammed in and unnecessary.
I think that's where it jumps into your, sort of teenage boys thing issue, is we want to resolve this by lots of violence and big fight scene.
Yeah.
With things blowing up and people being shot off of buildings so they fall down next to land speeder.
Again, it's a Western. Some guy's up on the...
Some guy always up on top of the
Somebody's up in the dormer. He's going to get shot out.
and stuff like that. But yeah, I think, and again, that was my take of it, it's what it is. So again, I'm definitely in sort of the hopeful phase. Like I said, I very much enjoyed episodes 1 and 2. I found I was much more forgiving of episodes 1 and 2. Even the fight scenes, I thought being a bit gratuitous, I was much more forgiving of them. To me, episode 3 was just too predictable.
Yeah.
The same as, and I'm going to predict it right now since I have not seen episode 4. You guys may not believe that, but I haven't seen episode 4. He's going to meet a friend in episode 4. It's you can sort of see that's the plot going, and I have the feeling that's the woman we've seen in the pictures. He needs a crew. I think that's going to be part of the thing with it, is he's not going to be alone in this. He needs
when
a
you
crew.
load up the Disney Plus app, the main banner for the Mandalorian, there's a woman off to his
That's
right.
what I mean,
So
that
yeah,
woman,
they're going to introduce somebody at some point.
And I have the feeling she's going to get introduced in episode 4, and it's going to be something to help him. She's probably going to start off as an enemy, and then he's going to help, and then it's going to help him a little bit the way the Ugnaught does. Who are you?
They need to bring that guy back.
You know, I'm really hoping they do bring him back. I very much enjoyed his character. I also really liked the I Have Spoken. I thought that was a neat sort of presentation of the idea that like his language was kind of this weird formal thing, which is then also echoed by the Mandalorians with the "This is the way."
Yeah.
Which I thought was very
those are the subtle
intriguing.
touches I really like. I'd much rather have an extra 10 minutes of that kind of stuff, a little more of attention to that kind of detail, and less jetpacks.
I would have quite frankly liked to have 10 minutes more of him interacting with the Forge Master, or the Artificer, and the other Mandalorians in the sort of underground.
I do find that we never take our helmet thing off to be implausible.
Yeah, I mean, presumably you have to sleep
shower with it on, the bathroom with it on. It's just silly, hopefully they clarify that. Like you never take it off, like
nobody
around
knows
people.
Who you are. Nobody knows who you are.
That makes sense, but it's still a little silly to me. Like he's walking through this hallway, and there's a bunch of people in helmets. It kind of looks like a cheesy convention, like a costume party. I don't know.
Did you notice? And I know this is one of the subtle things I thought was very interesting. Is did you notice that now the credits in front of the Mandalorian when they do the Star Wars credit is all the helmets?
No, I didn't see that.
So if you watch the credit, like actually watch the intro when they do the intro before it does the Mandalorian and the Star Wars, it does the Star Wars sort of background thing, like the old LucasArts one they used to do. It flashes up just quick pictures of all the helmets, ending with the Mandalorian helmet, and then does the Star Wars logo. And so it was one of the things where I think there's an issue with Star Wars of people wearing helmets. That's the thing. And I've got to wonder if that might be a subtle tip towards Episode 9. Because we have Episode 8 with the idea of Kylo Ren sort of throwing the helmet away, but obviously he gets it back in conjunction with Episode 9. Are we playing with the idea of identity and something that is, what is your identity? Your identity is partially hidden. I could imagine that they're going to go somewhere with a very big theme in this. At the same time, they may not, but I could very well they're going to go to a big theme in this. So the idea that like Darth Vader being helmeted, the Stormtroopers being helmeted, there's a value to anonymity,
broader cultural context in the universe. I don't know. That'd be interesting.
It could be interesting.
All right. Well, I think we've killed the Mandalorian at this point.
Probably.
Let's hit Episode 9 a little bit. Well, so what are you thinking so far? I think we've seen all of the commercials for all the trailers.
I have to admit, my one thing that I really love about the trailer. And it's by far my favorite element of the entire trailer is the word over text and the fact that it basically says, this Christmas or whatever it says in conjunction with it, the saga will end.
Yes. The best news I've heard all year.
Well, but I love the fact of how definitive it is.
Yeah.
And what it says sort of about it and what it really harkens me back to. And I remember when I first saw the original trailer for Episode 1, the original trailer for Episode 1 is so much better than Episode 1.
Yeah.
But the trailer
and it starts off with every saga has a beginning.
Yeah. And so the hark back to the saga has a beginning, the saga will end. That's what this thing is. I really like that. I just thought it was very well done, and it's done in the same way with the sort of same text just sort of printed across it. There's no statement of it. It's just done across flashing images. I really like that in this things, and I like the fact that they're being clear. This is ending.
Yeah.
And it gives me that idea that this is ending. Characters are disposable. Like we can end this as to what it is. It's got a Game of Thrones feel. Once you read anything in Game of Thrones, you know that characters can die.
I feel like the more I think about it, the more the feeling I get from both the trailers, but just sort of the messaging coming out of Disney is that they are ready to move on from the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
I think they feel like it is an anchor weighing them down on what they can do, kind of going back to The Mandalorian because of fan expectations for what they need to see for it to be a quote-unquote Star Wars movie. There needs to be a space fight. There needs to be a lightsaber fight. Somebody's got to have mysterious parents. There's all of these Star Wars tropes that if you don't do them, the people are like, well, what was that? And, it's Star Wars is not just a movie you can go see and either it was a good movie or not. It has to be certain things or it's not really Star Wars and you get all this fan annoyance. So I feel like there's a good chance they're going to massacre the cast to clear it all out and prevent anybody clamoring for more of this. And I think I've heard the actors say, like, no, there's nothing else for Rey. There's nothing else for these characters. This is it, and they're done. So I feel like that's a possibility. I will never understand the obsession in Star Wars with having movies in space where people ride animals.
People love riding animals in Star Wars.
It's gotten silly. Like we had Empire Strikes Back, we had the Tauntauns. They at least explained it. It's too cold for speeders. You have to go out on Tauntauns.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Fine. What do they feed them? I don't know. But okay, there's at least an explanation for that.
I always assumed Tauntauns were native to Hoth too, which is something they found.
Yeah, I assume that too. And then Return of the Jedi, we didn't have anything like that really. But then in Star Wars, you have them riding on the big lizard things in the desert.
Yeah.
Like really, you don't have anything that can drive in a desert that's more convenient than a big lizard.
The dewbacks made sense to me in Star Wars because the planet is supposed to be primitive.
Yeah.
And so, again, it was like, okay, I don't have a problem with that because the planet, they're supposed to be pointing at this planet's primitive. It's backwater.
Yeah. But then we have episode 1, it's the strangest thing. They use a horse-like creature to tow a powered land speeder.
Yeah.
What? I mean, it's like I'm going to hook up my my car to a horse and have it tow my car. Just drive the car. I don't understand it. So there's things like that. We saw that in the last episode where they go to the casino planet, where there's at least an explanation for why the animals are there. It's a racetrack. They ride those animals, and then there's a scene in this trailer where they're riding some kind of animal across what looks like the top of a Star Destroyer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I like the idea of we're going to walk across the top of the Star Destroyer. That's a different set we've never seen before. But it's a spaceship, so how are they outside? And why are there animals on the Star Destroyer? Is it like Spaceballs? Is it a petting zoo? I mean, I don't know. There's elements like that where I'm like, I really hope this is less dumb than it looks like in the trailer.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the worry we all have in conjunction with it is Star Wars has a habit of doing things occasionally that are dumb because of Star Wars.
It's going to be because dumb so much. Just make it at least make sense. I don't have to love everything about it, but when I'm watching the movie, it needs to have just a bare minimum of sufficient internal logic so that I'm not constantly second guessing what the characters are doing because what they're doing makes no sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we're a little worried about that. It's part of the reason it's why I liked episode 8, because to me, episode 8 made more sense to me, even though it was sort of throwing everything else out the window. Mm-hmm. Episode 8 felt more internally consistent to me than some of the other ones did.
I like the ideas in that. I like the idea of Luke turning away from the Force.
And just being fed up with it, you know, is the idea that, hey, this, the prophecy was we bring balance to the Force. Balance stinks. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of be the idea. And it was like, okay, I like that idea, that this is not necessarily a good thing. The one thing I do think we're going to see in episode 9, and I've thought about this, quite a bit recently, I'm really wondering if what we're going to see in episode 9 is a shattering of the universe, so which allows them more play space with the idea that we're going to basically have the First Order is bad, but so is the Republic. And we're really going to have this thing that basically says...
The Republic's gone. Their planet got blown up.
Yeah, but the idea that we need to get rid of central government from it, because the Star Wars space works much better when we have these sort of small, isolated discussions where we can have like a planetary governor that's just doing what he's doing, and that's what we can discuss. There's some obviously basic political themes there, but I think you can definitely get into something with the idea of it works better as a Western when we're in the lawless West.
Yeah, like Tatooine works that way as an isolated setting where like these gangsters hold sway and you're kind of off on the fringes of the galaxy. And that's maybe where the prequels kind of got off kilter is how do you portray something like an interstellar war playing out across all these planets? It never felt like anything was at stake. The people in Coruscant just went about their business and nobody cared, and that was never even remarked upon because that could have been part of the plot, and it wasn't. It never felt like a real story. The characters didn't feel like real people. The Mandalorian has a little more substance to it that way. These do feel on some level like real people struggling. The sequels, 8 and 9 or 7 and 8. Feel closer to that, better than the prequels were.
Yeah,
what's Rey's character?
Yeah.
Like, describe her character: stubborn, tough.
She's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
I mean, it's bad, but
Luke was whiny and wistful, and his head was always off in the clouds.
He was
naive, and romanticized things because although he lived in this rugged farm area, he had no real world experience.
Yeah.
Rey has the same basic background, but she seems so much more worldly. Like, how does she know how to fly a spaceship? Like, we at least learn that Luke has a skyhopper and that he's a good pilot. There's a throwaway line about that. We see nothing like that from Rey. All of a sudden, she needs to fly a ship so she can fly one, and she's insanely good at it. And we learn it's because she's got the Force, but, in Star Wars, Luke gets into an X-Wing he's never flown before, his first time flying into space, and he's a little nervous, and you can see it. There's none of that with the Rey character.
Well, they even cut the scene with him and Biggs, that's known for the novel and stuff like that, where he clearly is nervous.
Well, they filmed that scene. That was in a special edition where Biggs said, the Red Leader says, "Are you sure you can handle one of these?" And Biggs is like, "He'll figure it out. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
And he does. And so there's just a little bit more of that sort of, these characters are the heroes, but they're not perfect. I mean, there's still an element in these the sequels of the. I don't know. They're not as badly written as the prequels.
No.
But what's Finn's character?
I think part of the reason
what's
that
Poe's character?
Yeah, I think part of the reason they actually are better written than the prequels is because I think they're not written for kids. And again, I kind of bump into that. I go back to Star Wars initially, and I go back to the Western in space. And it's one of those things where this is, with a lot of the stuff in Star Wars that's really sort of bumped into me as a lot recently, is that Star Wars is a Western in space. Westerns are not nice films. You go back and you look in conjunction with Westerns. They may predefine good and evil. It's stuff that we, look at today and say, hey, these are, tropes and stereotypes and things like that. But they were never nice movies. Mm-hmm. So I took film studies when I was in college. The very first movie I analyzed was The Searchers, which is a John Wayne movie. And I analyzed it from mise en scène, which is basically what do you see on screen versus what is off screen. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene in it which starts the searching. So it's basically the idea is that they're searching for the person's kidnapped wife, I believe it is, his wife or daughter or something like that that's been kidnapped. But it starts off with there's a scene where you find out that basically this, poor farmer's, family has been slaughtered. And the way you find out about it is the John Wayne character rides up and the person's come and found him. He rides up and they go to the barn and you simply see him open the door.
You see his reaction.
You see his reaction as he's looking in the door, and it's this horrified reaction. And then him turning around and grabbing the father and like, do not go in there. And stuff like that, as it's the what did you see? It's a scene that's actually echoed in Letters to Iwo Jima. Interestingly enough, a very similar scene is sort of echoed in there. But it's one of those where that to me was a lot of the Western of this is very horrible. The world in the Western is very horrible. It's very rough. It's very dark. It's very gritty, sort of things like that, which again, I kind of get from The Mandalorian. I think the prequels were very happy. They were trying to be kids' movies. They were trying to be sort of fun and happy and playful. Whereas that's not Star Wars. It comes ultimately back to why do we have such a problem with Han shooting first? Han is a smuggler. He is a scoundrel. He is a criminal.
It's the whole point of that is to have a character arc for him, and if we make him less less of a, I don't want to say naughty, nasty, a less redeemed
he's opportunistic.
Character. Yeah, if he's not kind of a borderline bad guy at first, then his transformation by the end into somebody who's bought into this rebellion and is making sacrifices for people he loves doesn't mean as much.
Yeah, and to me it really sets up him in the beginning of this is the kind of thing that happens in Old West saloons. Somebody shoots somebody under the table and nobody pays it second heed to it. Okay, that fits the Western sort of theme. And again, I see a little bit of that with the concept of the follow-on movies. I think a lot of people complained about, Han's death and sort of things like that, but I see a little bit of that idea of these are not nice characters. This is a sort of rough world. And like I said, I like the fact that they're doing that in The Mandalorian. I'm hoping that they keep it up in conjunction with the sequels. And I'm sort of hoping that they're intending to end the sequels so they can go a little bit more to it. And I think they're trying it out in Mandalorian to see what happens.
There's another trilogy coming out. We don't know much about it yet, but I suspect what they're going to do with Episode 9 is pave the way for whatever that's going to be. So there's that. Well, so there you go, folks. Go watch Star Wars. Feel free to tweet at us. Let us know what you think, and we will probably do a follow-on episode episode where we revisit our predictions from a couple episodes ago and give you our own thoughts. We'll do probably our, 5 or 10 minutes where we break it down and talk about what we thought about it.
Yep.
So, all right. There's the music. It's time to go. We don't have plans for the next episode yet. It'll be a surprise for all of us when we get there.
In the new year, more than likely.
In the new year. So in the meantime, check out our website at lggpodcast.com. It has links to the various platforms where you can download prior episodes. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, and by email at lggpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to this podcast on the platforms and give us a review to help new listeners find us. You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Siders and Kirk at KirkDMN. That's all for today. We'll see you next time. Lorem, play us out.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by Lewis Rice LLC, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. This podcast was produced and recorded at Cool Fire Studios in St. Louis, Missouri.